I never expected to inherit anything from Grandma Rose. Not because she didn't love me, she did, fiercely, but because everyone knew the Morgan family fortune had been lost years ago. The sprawling ranch in West Texas, once the crown jewel of the family's oil empire, was now just 200 acres of sun-baked earth and memories. Or so they thought. My name is Emily Morgan, and this is the story of how my grandmother's last gift exposed decades of family lies and changed everything we thought we knew about the Morgan legacy. The day of the will reading dawned hot and dusty, typical for August in Texas. I walked into the law office in downtown Austin wearing my best sundress, which, working as a small-town librarian, wasn't saying much. My cousins were already there, dressed in designer clothes that screamed old money they no longer had. "Well, look who showed up," Jessica drawled, examining her manicured nails. "Thought you'd be too busy with your little books to bother." I ignored her, just like I'd been ignoring her jabs since we were kids. Jessica, along with her brothers Thomas and Bradley, represented everything I'd grown to hate about the Morgan family: entitled, arrogant, and completely disconnected from reality. Now, Jesse, Bradley smirked, adjusting his Rolex. "Be nice to our country cousin. She probably had to take a day off from reading to children to be here." Before I could respond, Mr. Harrison, Grandma Rose's attorney for the past 40 years, called us into the conference room. Uncle James and Aunt Patricia, Jessica's parents, were already seated, along with my father's empty chair. Dad had passed away 5 years ago, killed in a car accident that everyone blamed on the Morgan curse, the supposed hex that had brought down our once mighty family. "Thank you all for coming," Mr. Harrison began, his weathered face serious. "Rose Morgan was a remarkable woman who lived through remarkable times. Her last will and testament reflects both her wisdom and her unique perspective on family matters." I caught something in his tone. Was that almost a smile? But before I could ponder it, he began reading. The first few items were standard: small bequests to longtime servants, donations to local charities, her prized jewelry collection split between her granddaughters. Jessica preened when she received Grandma's famous sapphire necklace, shooting me a triumphant look. Then came the bombshell. "And to my beloved granddaughter, Emily Grace Morgan, I leave the entirety of the Morgan Ranch, including all 200 acres, the main house, and all associated buildings and equipment." The room erupted in chaos. "What?" Jessica shrieked. "That worthless dirt patch?" "This is ridiculous," Uncle James thundered. "The ranch should stay in the direct family line." "I am direct family," I said quietly. "My father was her son too." "Your father was a fool who got himself killed," Aunt Patricia snapped. "Just like you're a fool if you think you can manage a working ranch." Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. "There's more. The will stipulates that the property cannot be sold for a minimum of 1 year from the date of inheritance. Any attempt to force a sale will result in immediate forfeiture of all other bequests to the involved parties." I watched my cousins' faces carefully. Something flickered in Bradley's eyes. Anger? Fear? "This is insane," Thomas spoke up. "Emily doesn't know the first thing about ranch management. She'll run it into the ground." "Then why do you care?" I asked, genuinely curious. "If it's such a worthless property, why does it matter who gets it?" Because it's about family legacy," he sputtered. "The decision is final," Mr. Harrison said firmly. "The property transfers to Emily's ownership effective immediately. Here are the keys, deed, and relevant documentation." He handed me a thick envelope, ignoring the death glares from my relatives. Inside was a single key ring with 3 keys, a folder of legal documents, and something else. A handwritten note in Grandma's elegant script, for Emily's eyes only. "Emily," Bradley's voice had turned smooth, reasonable. "Let's discuss this like family. The ranch is a money pit. Property taxes alone will eat up your librarian's salary. Why not let us buy you out? Quick cash, no hassles." I thought about Grandma Rose, about the quiet strength in her eyes whenever she'd visited me at the library. She'd spent hours there in her final months, watching me work, smiling that mysterious smile. "No sale," I said firmly. "I'm keeping the ranch." "You'll regret this," Jessica hissed as I stood to leave. "That place is cursed, just like the rest of us." I turned back at the door. Maybe the curse is only for those who believe in it. The drive out to the ranch took nearly 2 hours, giving me plenty of time to think. The Morgan Ranch had been in our family for 4 generations, built by my great-grandfather during the oil boom of the 1930s. The wells had run dry decades ago, or so the story went, leaving nothing but barren land and a once grand house slowly decaying under the Texas sun. But something didn't add up. Why had Grandma spent so much time at the library in her final months? Why had she left me, of all people, the ranch? And why were my cousins so desperate to buy a supposedly worthless property? The ranch house appeared on the horizon, a sprawling Texas Victorian that had seen better days. The white paint was peeling, the wraparound porch sagged slightly, but there was still dignity in its bones. Like Grandma Rose herself, weathered but unbowed. I parked in front of the house and just sat there, taking it all in. The huge oak trees that had shaded generations of Morgans. The old barn, its red paint faded to a dusty pink. The windmill creaking slowly in the afternoon breeze. This was mine now. All of it. Inside the house, everything was exactly as I remembered from childhood visits. The antique furniture draped in dust covers. The family photos lining the walls. Happy times, before the wells ran dry and the money disappeared. Before the curse began. I found Grandma's study on the second floor, a cozy room lined with books. Her reading glasses still sat on the desk, next to a stack of papers. My hands trembled slightly as I opened her note. My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, then everything has gone according to plan. You're probably wondering why I chose you to inherit the ranch. The answer is simple. You're the only one who ever saw its true value. Do you remember all those hours you spent in the library? I wasn't just visiting. I was watching. Watching you help people, share knowledge, solve problems. You have your great-grandfather's mind, though you never knew him. He was like you. Quiet, thoughtful, always looking beneath the surface. The ranch holds secrets, Emily. Secrets that others in the family either never understood or chose to ignore. Start in the barn. Look for the box marked Rose's Garden Seeds. What you find there will explain everything. Trust no one until you understand the full truth. The family will try to pressure you, maybe even threaten you. Stand firm. You are stronger than you know. All my love, Grandma Rose. P.S. The third key on the ring isn't for any door, it's for understanding. My heart pounding, I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen and headed out to the barn. The afternoon sun was fading, casting long shadows through the weathered boards. The air inside smelled of old hay and engine oil. It took nearly an hour of searching before I found it, a dusty cardboard box shoved behind some old farm equipment. Rose's Garden Seeds was written on the side in faded marker. Inside, beneath packets of actual flower seeds, was a metal lockbox. The third key fit perfectly. What I found inside changed everything I thought I knew about my family. There were documents, geological surveys, land maps, mineral rights agreements. But these weren't old papers from the 1930s oil boom. These were dated within the last 5 years. And according to them, the Morgan Ranch sat on top of one of the largest untapped oil deposits in West Texas. My hands shook as I read through the reports. The original wells hadn't run dry at all. They'd barely scratched the surface. Modern drilling technology had revealed vast reserves deep beneath the ranch, worth potentially billions. But that wasn't all. Mixed in with the surveys were letters, emails, and memos documenting a conspiracy that made my blood run cold. Uncle James, Bradley, and others had known about the oil for years. They'd been quietly buying up mineral rights from neighboring ranches, positioning themselves to control the entire field. The only thing standing in their way had been Grandma Rose. She refused to sell, refused to lease the mineral rights, refused to let them drill. The curse that had supposedly destroyed our family's fortune was nothing but a story, a cover for their secret preparations. Now I understood why they'd been so eager to buy the ranch from me, why they tried to convince everyone it was worthless. They'd been playing a long game, waiting for Grandma to pass away, certain the property would be split up or sold. Instead, she'd left it all to me. A noise outside the barn made me freeze. Headlights swept across the wall. A car coming up the drive. I quickly packed everything back into the lockbox and hid it behind some old paint cans. Through the barn door, I could see Bradley's expensive SUV parking next to my car. He wasn't alone. Thomas and 2 men I didn't recognize stepped out, carrying flashlights. Emily? Bradley's voice called out. You out here? We need to talk about the ranch. I slipped out the barn's back door, keeping to the shadows. Something in their stance, the way they moved, told me this wasn't a friendly family visit. Check the house, I heard Bradley tell one of the strangers. She's got to be here somewhere. Find those documents. My pulse racing, I made it to my car unseen. The engine started on the first try, thank God. And I peeled out of the driveway, gravel spraying. In my rearview mirror, I saw Bradley running back to his SUV. They followed me for 20 miles before I lost them on the back roads I'd known since childhood. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex in the small town where I worked, my hands had stopped shaking. I needed help. More than that, I needed a plan. Grandma Rose hadn't just left me a ranch, she'd left me a mission. A chance to expose decades of lies and set things right. But first, I had to survive long enough to do it. Inside my apartment, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd never used before. Another gift from Grandma Rose, written at the bottom of her letter. If you need help, call this number. Ask for Sarah. Tell her Rose sent you. The phone rang 3 times before a crisp voice answered. Capital Investments, how may I direct your call? I need to speak with Sarah, I said. Rose sent me. A pause then, 1 moment. What happened next would change not just my life, but the entire future of the Morgan legacy. But that's another story, one that begins with a voice on the phone saying 6 simple words. Tell me everything, and don't leave anything out. Sarah Harrison turned out to be exactly who I needed. Mr. Harrison's daughter and a ruthless corporate attorney specializing in oil and gas litigation. The moment I walked into her Houston office the next morning, I knew Grandma Rose had planned this perfectly. So Sarah said, examining the documents I'd rescued from the barn, my father told me to expect you eventually. Rose Morgan was a remarkable woman, and a lot smarter than your family gave her credit for. I sat in her sleek office, still wearing yesterday's clothes after a sleepless night. You knew about the oil. Rose hired me 2 years ago to investigate quietly. What we found. Sarah spread out the geological surveys on her desk. Your uncle and cousins have been building quite the little empire. Buying up mineral rights through shell companies, falsifying environmental reports, even bribing local officials to keep things quiet. But why all the secrecy? Why not just develop the oil legally? Sarah's smile was sharp. Because of the Morgan Trust. Your great-grandfather wasn't just rich, he was clever. The original trust stipulates that if oil is ever found on the ranch again, the profits must be shared equally among all family members and a significant portion donated to local education. The pieces clicked into place. So by keeping it secret and trying to get control of the ranch, they could drill without activating the trust requirements, keep all the profits for themselves. Sarah pulled out another document, but Rose saw it coming. She spent the last 3 years documenting everything. The only thing she needed was someone she could trust to inherit the ranch. Me, I whispered. But I don't know anything about oil or corporate law. How am I supposed to fight them? That's why I'm here. Sarah leaned forward. Rose paid my retainer in full before she died. I have everything we need to expose their scheme, but we have to move carefully. They're desperate now, and desperate people are dangerous. As if to prove her point, my phone buzzed with a text from Bradley. Last chance, cousin. $5 million cash for the ranch, no questions asked. Don't be stupid. I showed Sarah the message. She nodded thoughtfully. They're getting nervous. Good. Now, here's what we're going to do. The next week was a blur of activity. Sarah's team of investigators documented every detail of the property, while private security kept my family at bay. We discovered the truth was even bigger than we'd imagined. The oil deposits extended far beyond what the initial surveys had shown. Your grandmother knew exactly what she was sitting on, Sarah explained as we reviewed the latest reports. She could have been a billionaire many times over, but she waited, watching to see who in the family would prove worthy of the legacy. And she chose the librarian, I said, still amazed. She chose the person who cared about more than money. Sarah's expression softened. Do you know what she told my father? Emily understands that true wealth isn't what you keep, it's what you share. The confrontation came sooner than we expected. I was at the ranch, meeting with environmental assessors, when a convoy of vehicles roared up the driveway. Uncle James led the charge, followed by my cousins and several men in expensive suits. This ends now, he announced, storming onto the porch. Emily, you're in way over your head. We have buyers ready to pay top dollar. Don't force us to do this the hard way. I stood my ground, remembering Grandma Rose's strength. The hard way? You mean like sending people to break in and seal documents? Or maybe you mean the illegal mineral rights deals you've been making. His face darkened. You don't know what you're talking about. Actually, Sarah's voice rang out as she emerged from the house. She knows exactly what she's talking about. James Morgan, I'm serving you with notice of investigation into multiple violations of state and federal law regarding mineral rights and environmental regulations. She handed him a thick envelope while my cousins watched in shock. You can't prove anything, Bradley sputtered. Really? I pulled out my phone and played a recording. Bradley's voice discussing bribes with a county official captured by the security system he didn't know we'd installed. Want to bet? What followed was the most intense 2 hours of my life. In the same study where Grandma Rose had written her letter to me, Sarah laid out the evidence piece by piece. The falsified surveys, the shell companies, the bribes, the entire conspiracy to steal what should have been shared with the whole family. You have two options, Sarah concluded. Either we take this to the authorities and watch your empire crumble, or we do this the right way, according to the original Morgan Trust. You'll bankrupt us, Aunt Patricia wailed. No, I corrected her. We'll make you honest. There's more than enough wealth here for everyone if we do it legally and fairly. Uncle James slumped in his chair, suddenly looking old. Rose knew all along, didn't she? She was just waiting. She knew, I confirmed. She knew everything. But more importantly, she knew there was a better way. Over the next 6 months, the transformation of the Morgan Ranch was remarkable. Under Sarah's guidance, we established a proper corporate structure that honored the original trust. The oil development proceeded legally and sustainably, with significant protections for the land Grandma Rose had loved so much. My cousins fought it at first, but the numbers didn't lie. Even with the profit-sharing requirements and educational trust contributions, everyone stood to benefit enormously. More importantly, we were doing it the right way. No shortcuts, no schemes, no betrayals. The Morgan curse was finally broken, not by striking oil, but by choosing integrity over greed. 1 year to the day after the will reading, I stood on the ranch house porch watching the sunset. The property had been transformed. The house was restored to its former glory, but with modern improvements that respected its history. The old barn had been preserved, converted into a museum telling the Morgan family story. All of it, including the hard truths. Jessica, of all people, had surprised me the most. Once the fighting stopped, she'd revealed a genuine talent for corporate communications. Now she handled the company's public relations, focusing especially on our educational initiatives. You know, she said, joining me on the porch, I never understood Grandma Rose when she told us the real Morgan legacy wasn't in oil. I think I finally get it. I nodded, watching dust motes dance in the golden light. It's about choices. Every generation gets to choose what kind of legacy they'll leave. She chose you well, Jessica admitted. I wouldn't have done this, shared it all, I'd have taken the money and run. That's why she chose me, I said simply, because she knew I'd choose differently. Inside, I could hear the buzz of activity as family members gathered for our monthly board meeting. Bradley had turned his financial skills to legitimate use, managing our charitable foundation. Thomas was heading up environmental compliance, determined to protect the land he'd once seen as worthless. Uncle James had retired, but he still came to every meeting, quieter now, perhaps wiser. The last time we spoke, he finally told me the truth about my father's death. Not an accident after all, but a lonely man's choice after discovering the family's corruption. That truth had hurt, but it had also healed something. Dad would have been proud of how things turned out. Sarah joined us on the porch, contracts in hand. Ready for the next phase, the Educational Trust is ready to fund its first round of scholarships. I smiled, thinking of the local students who would benefit. Grandma Rose always said knowledge was the only wealth that truly matters. Smart woman, Sarah agreed. Speaking of which, what are you going to do about the library? I kept my job throughout everything, working part-time while learning to manage the ranch and the company. The library had become even more precious to me now, a reminder of who I was and why Grandma Rose had chosen me. I'm staying, I said. Just because we're wealthy doesn't mean we stop doing what matters. Later that night, after everyone had gone, I sat in Grandma's study reading through her old journals. She documented everything, not just the oil conspiracy, but her hopes for the family's future. The last entry, written just days before she died, brought tears to my eyes. My dearest Emily will find us someday and understand. The real curse on our family was never bad luck or dry wells. It was the belief that wealth matters more than worth. She'll break that curse not because she's the smartest or the strongest, but because she knows that true inheritance isn't what you own, but what you choose to do with it. The oil beneath this ranch isn't the real treasure. The real treasure is the chance to do things right, to leave a legacy of more than just money. Emily understands this. That's why she'll succeed where others failed. Because sometimes the greatest wealth comes not from what we take, but from what we're willing to give. I closed the journal feeling the weight of her wisdom. Outside, the Texas night was alive with possibilities. The old windmill creaked in harmony with the new oil derricks, a symphony of past and future. We'd found more than just oil beneath the Morgan Ranch. We'd found truth, redemption, and a new way forward. The family curse was broken not by striking it rich, but by striking a balance between prosperity and principle. Grandma Rose had known this all along. She left me more than just a ranch. She left me the chance to prove that the right choice, though harder, is always worth making. As I walked back to my car that night, the stars seemed especially bright over the Texas plains. I thought about all the lives we touched through the educational trust, all the good we could do with this incredible inheritance. Well played, Grandma, I whispered to the night sky. Well played indeed.